I didn't go into the woods looking for trouble. I went because I needed a few days where nobody could reach me. My phone had been buzzing for weeks. Work messages, family stuff, friends checking in, people I cared about, but still people who wanted something from me, even if it was just attention. I felt thin, like if one more person asked me a question, I'd snap. So I loaded my old pack, told my boss I was sick, and drove north until the city lights were gone. I picked a trail I'd hiked once years ago. It wasn't a famous route. It didn't have a lot of reviews or photos online. It had a small parking lot, a weathered map board, and a sign about staying on marked paths. The plan was simple. Walk in, camp 2 nights, walk out. I didn't bring a gun. I didn't bring a satellite phone. I brought a knife, a small hatchet, a headlamp, and a can of pepper spray I'd never used. I brought a paper map and a compass. I brought enough food to not think about it. I parked in the late afternoon. The air smelled like pine and damp soil. The woods were quiet in the way they get when the wind is low, like everything is holding its breath. I signed the trail register. There were only a few names for that week, and most of them were days old. I didn't think much of it. The first mile was easy. The path was narrow and soft with needles. It wound through tall trees that blocked the sun, so the light already looked like evening. I remember feeling a small relief, like I'd stepped out of a loud room. I kept moving until the trail opened into a shallow clearing near a creek. It wasn't an official campsite, but there was flat ground and a ring of stones where someone had made a fire before. I decided to set up there. While I worked, I noticed something that felt off in a mild, hard-to-name way. No birds, not none at all, but fewer than I expected. Usually you hear constant little sounds, calls, flutters, small movements. Here it felt like the woods were empty. I told myself it was just the time of day. I pitched my tent. I filtered water. I ate a quick meal. I sat on a log and listened. The creek made a steady sound. The trees creaked now and then. That was it. When the light dropped, I crawled into my sleeping bag. The quiet pressed in, but it was the kind of quiet I'd wanted. I fell asleep fast. I woke up in the middle of the night because something had moved near the tent. It wasn't a loud sound. It was just a shift in the air and a faint scrape, like a boot on dirt. I held my breath. I listened. Nothing. Then another soft scrape. Slow. I reached for my headlamp but didn't turn it on. I didn't want to announce myself. I sat up and tried to see through the tent fabric. It was too dark. I had the pepper spray in the pocket by my hip. My hand found it and wrapped around it. The scraping stopped. I waited a long time. My heart beat hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. After a while, I heard the creak again. Nothing else. I lay back down. I told myself it was a raccoon or deer, maybe a fox. I didn't sleep well after that. In the morning, the clearing looked normal. The sky was pale and the air cold. My breath showed in short clouds. I unzipped the tent and stepped out. The first thing I saw was a footprint. It was near the edge of the clearing where the ground was soft. It was a clean impression. A boot tread. I crouched and stared at it. It wasn't mine. My boots had a different pattern. There were 2 more prints, faint, leading toward the creek. I stood up slowly and looked around. The woods were still. The trees stood straight. Sunlight cut between branches. Nothing moved. I walked around the clearing, not even sure what I was doing, like I could find an answer by circling the place. I found more footprints near the fire ring, and then they vanished where the ground turned hard. Someone had been there. Maybe another hiker had passed through. Maybe they'd stopped for water. Maybe they'd stood near my tent at night for a second and then kept going. That last thought tightened my stomach. I packed up quicker than I planned. The idea of being alone had felt good yesterday. This morning it felt different. Being alone meant nobody would hear me if something happened. I told myself I was being dramatic. I started hiking deeper along the trail. The map showed a small lake a few miles ahead, with an official campsite nearby. That seemed safer. People would be around, or at least it would be a place where people were supposed to be. The trail climbed slowly. The ground got rockier. In places, the path cut through thick brush. It felt like I'd walked into a section of forest that had been left alone for decades. I saw a torn strip of bright fabric snagged on a branch. It fluttered slightly. At first I thought it was trail tape, but it wasn't. It looked like part of a jacket or a backpack strap. I stopped and studied it. I didn't touch it. There were no other signs, no broken branches in a pattern, no obvious path leading off. Just that strip of fabric, hanging there like a warning. I moved on. A little farther, I found something that made me stop again. A shoe. It was lying off the trail in a patch of moss, half hidden. A hiking shoe. Dark gray. One lace still tied. I stood over it. People lose gear sometimes. A shoe could fall off a pack. Someone could drop it. But it felt wrong. A shoe isn't something you just drop without noticing. I looked around. The woods were dense. No clear footprints on the moss. No obvious drag marks. Just trees and shadow. I backed away and kept walking. By the time I reached the lake, the sun was higher, but the air was still cool. The water was dark and still, with a thin layer of mist floating near the surface. There were 2 campsites by the shore, marked by posts. One was empty. The other had an old fire ring and a log bench. No tents, no people. I felt disappointed and relieved at the same time. I set up my camp in the empty site. I tried to act normal. I laid out my sleeping bag to air. I hung my food bag in a tree. Then I walked down to the lake to wash my hands. That's when I saw it. At first I thought it was driftwood, something pale near the waterline. I stepped closer. It wasn't wood. It was a piece of a person. A forearm. I knew it right away, even though my brain tried to reject it. The shape, the hand at the end, fingers curled slightly as if it had been dropped there. I froze. My mouth went dry. My stomach turned. The arm was partly wet, partly caked with dirt. I didn't look closely. I couldn't. I backed up fast and stumbled on a rock. I stood there, breathing hard. I remember saying out loud, to nobody, "No way." I looked around the lake. No movement, no sound. The arm just lay there like the most wrong thing in the world. My first thought was to run. My second thought was my phone. I pulled it out. No service. Of course. I stared at the screen, tapping as if it would change. It didn't. I told myself to stay calm. I told myself there had to be some explanation, but there wasn't one that didn't involve something terrible. I walked back to my campsite without taking my eyes off the trees. I packed my bag in a rush, not caring about neatness. I shoved my tent into its sack like it was fighting me. I thought about leaving the arm where it was. I thought about taking a photo as proof. Then I realized how stupid that was. Proof for who? If I got out alive, the authorities could come. If I didn't, the photo wouldn't matter. I started down the trail back toward the parking lot. I moved fast, almost jogging. I kept stopping to listen. No footsteps behind me. No voices. But the woods felt changed. Like everything I'd ignored yesterday was now a threat. After about a mile, the trail split. One branch led back the way I'd come. The other led to a shorter route to a road, according to the map. It was marked as rough, less maintained. A shorter route sounded good. I took it. At first it was fine. The path was narrow but visible. It dipped into a low area where the ground was muddy. It crossed a small stream on slick rocks. Then the trail started to fade. Not vanish, but become less clear. The markers were farther apart. Branches hung low. Fallen trees forced me around. I told myself it was still better than turning around and passing that lake again. Then I saw something ahead that made me stop so hard my pack shifted on my shoulders. A tarp. Green. The kind people use for camping or covering wood. It was stretched between two trees, low to the ground, like a lean-to. There were no bright sleeping bags, no camp chairs. It didn't look like a normal camp. It looked like someone had made it to be hidden. I crouched behind a tree and stared. I listened. No voices, no movement. My mind went to the simplest idea. Someone lived out here. A person avoiding society. A person who didn't want to be found. And then the arm at the lake slid into my thoughts. My hands started to shake. I backed up slowly. A branch snapped under my boot. The sound was loud in the quiet. I froze, waiting for someone to yell or come out. Nothing. I kept backing away until the tarp was out of sight. I turned and walked the other way, faster. I didn't know exactly where I was going. I just knew I didn't want to go near that shelter. The trail behind me went back to the lake. The path ahead, the one I was now following, wasn't really a trail at all. It was more like a route people sometimes took, marked by broken branches and occasional footprints. I checked the map. The road was to the west. I tried to keep moving in that direction. The woods grew thicker. I started seeing signs that someone else had been in this area a lot. Not obvious signs like fresh trash or a fire pit. Smaller things. Pieces of cord tied around branches like markers. A pile of stones arranged in a way that didn't feel natural. Once I saw a thin strip of cloth tied to a sapling, like a flag. I kept going. The ground sloped down toward a ravine. As I walked, a smell hit me. It wasn't the normal smell of wet leaves or decay. It was something heavy and sour. I stopped and swallowed. The smell got stronger when I moved forward. I covered my nose with my sleeve and kept walking. I came around a cluster of ferns and saw a low dip in the ground, like a shallow pit. At first, I thought it was a place where animals had dug. Then I saw what was in it, a body, or what was left of one. I didn't step closer. I didn't need to. The shape was there, half covered with leaves and dirt, clothing torn and dirty, a face I couldn't see clearly. Nearby, another shape, another. I stood with my knees locked, as if my legs might give out. I didn't scream. I didn't run right away. My brain seemed to slow down, like it was trying to make the scene make sense. People die in the woods sometimes. Accidents. Exposure. But not like this. Not multiple. Not in a pit. And the smell. It wasn't just one. I backed up. My foot slid on loose dirt. A rock clattered down the slope. The sound echoed in the ravine. I froze again, listening. This time I heard something. A distant, steady sound. Footsteps. Not close, but not far. They came from uphill, in the direction I'd been walking. Someone was approaching. I turned and moved fast, staying low. I didn't care about stealth now, only distance. I pushed through brush, ignoring scratches on my arms. I moved away from the ravine, away from the pit. The footsteps behind me kept coming. I couldn't tell if they were following me or just moving through the area. But the rhythm felt deliberate, slow, even, like someone who knew exactly where they were going. I tried to breathe quietly, but my breath came in rough pulls. I kept moving. After a few minutes, I ducked behind a fallen tree and crouched. I held still. The footsteps came closer. Then they stopped. Silence. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, trying not to shake. When I opened them, I saw something through the trees. A man. He was about 30 or 40. Hard to tell. He wore dark clothes that blended with the woods. A hooded jacket, pants that looked like work pants, boots. He carried a pack. He wasn't walking like a hiker. He was moving like someone who lived here. He stopped near the edge of the ravine. I couldn't see his face clearly. The hood shaded it. He stood still for a long moment. Then he turned his head slightly, like he was listening. My heart thudded. I told myself not to move, not to breathe. He took a step forward. Another. He was coming toward the fallen tree where I hid. I looked down at my hands. My pepper spray was clipped to my belt. My knife was in my pocket. Neither felt like enough. The man stopped again. He tilted his head. I thought of the arm at the lake. I thought of the pit. I thought of the shoe on the moss. He took another step. I could hear his boots on dry leaves. He was close enough now that I could see his hands. He wore gloves. In one hand he held something long and narrow, not a walking stick. A tool. It looked like a thin saw or a blade with a handle. My mouth went numb. He paused. Then, without warning, he turned away. He walked back toward the ravine, slow and calm, like he'd decided something. I stayed frozen. I watched him until he disappeared behind trees. Only then did I move. I crawled away from the fallen tree, keeping low. I didn't run yet. I didn't want to make noise. I moved through brush until my lungs burned. I didn't know if he'd heard me. I didn't know if he'd smelled me. I didn't know if he'd seen me. I only knew I had to get out. I kept heading west. I checked the map again and again. The lines meant little now. The terrain didn't match the clean shapes on paper. I was off any real trail. The woods looked the same in every direction. I tried to mark my path with small breaks in branches, but my hands shook too much. At one point, I stumbled into a clearing and saw another tarp shelter. This one was bigger. It had ropes tied to trees, tensioned tight. It had a stack of split wood. It had a small fire pit. I didn't stop to inspect. I turned and went around it, wide. The smell near this shelter was worse. I couldn't tell if it was the same sour smell or something else, but it made my eyes water. I moved faster. A little farther, I found a narrow path that looked more used. The ground was packed. The brush was pushed back. It led downhill. I followed it, because any path felt better than none. It took me to a stream. The water was shallow and cold. It ran over stones and under logs. I knelt to drink, and that's when I saw something in the water. A piece of clothing. A sleeve. It snagged on a rock, moving slightly with the current. Above it, a pale shape. I stared. It was a foot. I didn't see the rest at first. The water hid it. The shadows hid it. Then my eyes adjusted and I saw more. Someone was in the stream bed, wedged between rocks. I didn't touch the body. I didn't go close. I backed away and nearly fell. My mind kept trying to turn the scene into something else. A mannequin. A deer. Anything. But I knew. I moved away from the stream and kept going. By now, I wasn't thinking about logic. I wasn't thinking about maps. I was thinking about the man in dark clothes. I was thinking about how calm he'd been. Like I was a problem he hadn't decided how to handle yet. The woods started to slope upward again. My legs felt heavy. My pack bounced against my back. I considered dropping it to move faster, but I was afraid to lose my water, my headlamp, my knife. I kept it. I walked until my mouth was dry and my throat hurt. The sun shifted lower. Shadows grew longer. That made fear spike again. Night in the woods was one thing when the worst danger was a raccoon. Now it felt like waiting for someone to come find me. I tried to think of what to do. I didn't have service. I didn't know where I was. If I camped, I'd be trapped in one spot. If I kept moving at night, I might break an ankle or get lost for good. I forced myself to slow down enough to think. I found a rocky outcrop that rose above the trees a little. Not a cliff, but a place where the brush was thinner. I climbed up and looked around. All I saw was forest. But in the far distance, There was a thin line that didn't look natural. A cut through the trees. A road. My relief was so sharp it almost hurt. I fixed the direction in my mind and started moving toward it. The ground between me and that line was rough. Fallen logs, thick brush, a swampy patch where my boots sank. I pushed through. I fell once, catching myself on my hands. When I stood, I noticed something on my palm, a smear of dark dried stain. I rubbed it, and it didn't come off easily. I looked down. My hand had landed on a piece of cloth, a torn shirt, next to it something hard, a small bone. I didn't stare. I didn't analyze. I stood and moved on. I kept looking over my shoulder. Once, I thought I saw movement between trees, a dark shape. It could have been a shadow. It could have been my mind, but it kept me moving. As the light faded, the woods seemed to close in. The sounds changed. More small rustles, more distant calls, night animals waking up. It should have felt normal. Instead, it felt like the world was getting louder so it could hide other sounds. I finally reached the edge of the road. It wasn't a paved highway. It was a narrow forest road, gravel and dirt, used by service vehicles. I stepped onto it and almost cried. I looked left and right. No cars, no lights. The road stretched through the trees and vanished around bends. I started walking along it, not caring which direction. A road meant people eventually. After a while, I saw tire tracks, fresh. That should have been comforting. It wasn't, because the tracks led into the woods at a spot where the brush had been pushed aside, a hidden turnoff. I slowed. I looked at the gap in the trees, a narrow path, wide enough for a vehicle. I could smell that sour smell again, faint but present. My body reacted before my mind did. My stomach clenched. My scalp tightened. I kept walking, forcing myself not to look. But I did look. Just a quick glance. And in that quick glance, I saw something pale hanging from a tree branch near the turnoff. It wasn't cloth. It was a hand. I didn't stop. I didn't even let myself process it. I walked faster, almost running. The road curved. The trees pressed close on both sides. The darkness deepened. I turned on my headlamp, pointing it down to see the ground. The beam caught dust and small insects. I kept going. Then I heard an engine. At first I thought it was my imagination. Then the sound grew clearer. A vehicle. Somewhere ahead. I stopped and listened. The engine sound was low, like a truck idling. I thought about running toward it. Then I thought about the fresh tire tracks. I thought about the hidden turnoff. I stood still, not sure what to do. The engine sound changed. It got louder. A vehicle was moving toward me. My skin went cold. I stepped off the road and into the trees, turning off my headlamp. I crouched behind a thick trunk. The headlights appeared around the bend, bright white beams that cut through the darkness. A truck rolled slowly along the road. not fast, not like someone driving from one place to another, like someone searching. The truck came closer. The lights swept over the trees. I held my breath. The truck slowed. It stopped. The engine idled. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a door opened. A figure stepped out. I couldn't see the face, only the shape. The figure stood in the road and looked into the woods. The head turned slightly, as if listening. I stayed still. My legs cramped in the crouch. The figure took a few steps toward the trees. A flashlight clicked on. The beam swept back and forth. Slow, patient. It moved across trunks, branches, the ground. It came closer. I pressed myself against the tree. The beam passed over the spot where I was, but the trunk blocked it. The figure stopped. The beam held steady on the ground near the tree. I could see the outline of boots. Work boots. The figure shifted weight. The beam moved up the trunk. I could see a gloved hand holding the flashlight. The beam climbed. My chest tightened. If the light moved another foot, it would hit my face. I raised my pepper spray, thumb ready. The beam paused. Then it moved away. The figure stepped back. The flashlight clicked off. The figure returned to the truck. The door closed. The truck rolled forward again, still slow. The headlights swept away. I stayed frozen until the sound faded. Only then did I let myself breathe. I felt dizzy, like I'd been underwater. I wanted to run in the opposite direction, but I didn't know which way the truck had come from or where it was going. If I ran, I might run right into it. I needed a plan. I waited a long time listening. No engine, no footsteps. Nothing. I stepped back onto the road and started walking again, keeping my headlamp off unless I had to. I moved as quietly as I could. I didn't care about getting lost now. I cared about getting away from that truck. After a while, the road opened slightly, and I saw a small structure ahead. A gate. A metal gate across the road, open to the side. Beyond it, the gravel looked more maintained. It meant I was closer to a managed area, a park boundary, a service entrance. I passed through and kept going. My legs shook with exhaustion. My hands were numb from cold. I wanted to collapse. But then I saw lights, not headlights. Fixed lights. A building, a small ranger station, or maintenance shed. I walked toward it like I was in a dream. The building had a porch light on and a window with a faint glow. I knocked. No answer. I knocked harder. Still nothing. Panic rose again. I tried the door, locked. I stepped back and looked around. There was a small sign with a phone number for emergencies. There was a radio antenna on the roof. There was a vehicle parked beside the building. A park truck. I ran to it and looked inside. Keys were not in it. Of course. I banged on the building again, shouting. My voice sounded wrong in the night. Finally, a light inside shifted. A shadow moved. The door opened a crack. A man in a uniform stood there holding a flashlight. He looked startled. I must have looked worse than I felt. Dirty, sweaty, eyes wide. "What the hell?" he said. I tried to speak and realized my throat was tight. There's bodies," I managed. He stared at me. I kept talking, words spilling out. "In the woods, a hand, a pit, someone in the stream. There's a man out there, a truck. He was looking for me. I need a phone. Please." The ranger opened the door fully. "Come in," he said. I stepped inside. The building smelled like coffee and dust. The ranger locked the door behind me. He led me to a chair and told me to sit. He asked my name. He asked where I'd been. I told him in broken pieces. He listened, but I could see the doubt in his face at first. The look people get when they're not sure if you're drunk or confused. Then he saw my hands shaking. He saw the scratches on my arms. He saw how I kept glancing at the window. He picked up a radio. He called someone. I didn't catch the words, but I heard the tone change. Professional. Alert. He made another call on a landline. He asked me again, slowly, to explain. This time I tried to be clear. I told him about the lake. I told him about the ravine. I told him about the tarp shelters. I told him about the truck on the road. I didn't embellish. I didn't add anything dramatic. I didn't need to. The ranger's face tightened. He nodded as if pieces were falling into place. He didn't say much, but he wrote notes. He offered me water. I drank it so fast I nearly choked. He told me to stay inside and not go near the windows. That made fear spike again. Is he close?" I asked. The ranger didn't answer directly. He checked the locks again. He turned off the porch light. He kept the room lights low. He told me his name was Mark. He told me this station wasn't meant for visitors at night, but he was on duty because of some issues. I wanted to know what that meant, but I was too tired to push. We sat in silence for a while. The radio crackled now and then. Mark listened, answered in short phrases. I tried to keep my breathing steady. I kept thinking about the man in the woods, the calm way he moved, the gloves, the tool in his hand. I thought about how close that flashlight beam had come to my face. I rubbed my hands together to stop them shaking. Mark got up and looked out a narrow slit in a curtain. He stepped back quickly. "What?" I asked. He held up a hand for silence. Then faintly I heard it. An engine. Far, but approaching. Mark moved to the back room and returned with something I hadn't expected. A rifle. He held it like he'd held one before. He checked the safety. My mouth went dry again. He whispered, "Stay down." I slid off the chair and crouched behind a desk. The engine sound grew closer. Then it slowed. Then it stopped. Silence. I could hear my own pulse. A door slammed outside. Footsteps on gravel, slow, steady. A shadow passed the window. Mark aimed the rifle toward the door. A knock came. Not frantic, not loud, just a controlled knock. Mark didn't answer. Another knock. Mark spoke in a firm voice. "State your business." A man's voice came through the door. Calm. "Need to report something," he said. Mark didn't move. "What?" "Saw someone on the road. Looked hurt. Thought you should know." My stomach dropped. He was talking about me. Mark's voice stayed flat. "Who are you?" A pause. "Just a local," the man said. "Didn't want them wandering out here. Dangerous at night." Mark didn't open the door. "Give me your name," Mark said. Another pause. "Name's not important," the man replied. "I'm trying to help." Mark raised the rifle slightly. He spoke louder. "Step back from the door. Now." Silence. Then a soft sound, like a boot shifting. Mark repeated, "Step back." The man's voice came again, still calm. "No need for that." Mark didn't respond. I could hear Mark's breathing, controlled but tight. Then the footsteps moved away. Slow, no hurry. A door opened, an engine started. The vehicle drove off. Mark held position a long time. He didn't lower the rifle until the sound was gone. Then he turned toward me. His face was pale. He whispered, "That's him." I stared at him, not sure I'd heard right. Mark swallowed. "We've had reports. Missing hikers. A couple hunters found. Things." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. The radio crackled. Mark answered. His voice was steady again, but his eyes kept flicking to the windows. He told whoever was on the radio that the suspect had approached the station. He gave a description. Dark clothes, hood, work boots, a vehicle, likely a truck. When he finished, he looked at me. "You did the right thing coming here," he said. I didn't feel like I'd done anything right. I felt like I'd stumbled into a nightmare and barely crawled out. Mark told me to stay behind the desk. He kept the rifle close. Outside, the night felt thick. We waited. Minutes passed. Then, in the distance, I heard more engines. Multiple. Approaching fast. Lights flashed through the trees. Vehicles pulled up. Doors slammed. Voices outside. Mark opened the door a crack and spoke to someone. Then he opened it fully. 2 officers stepped inside. They looked at me with sharp eyes, then at Mark. Mark spoke quickly, explaining. The officers nodded. One of them asked me my name. I gave it. He asked what I'd seen. I told him. This time the words came more smoothly, like my brain had accepted that this was real. The officer's expression didn't change much, but his jaw tightened at certain parts. When I mentioned the pit, he glanced at the other officer. He asked where it was. I tried to describe it with the map. I wasn't sure. I admitted that. He nodded as if he expected it. They told me I was safe now. I didn't believe them, not fully. Safety felt like something that had to be proven. An officer led me outside and into a vehicle. I sat in the back seat, staring at the dark forest beyond the headlights. More vehicles arrived. People in uniforms. People with flashlights. Mark stood on the porch speaking to someone. I watched his face. He looked tired in a way that wasn't just from being awake. I realized he'd been carrying this fear for a while. They drove me to a bigger station in town. It wasn't far, but it felt like a different world. Streetlights, houses, a gas station. Inside the police building, the air was warm and smelled like disinfectant. They gave me a blanket. They asked me questions. I answered until my head hurt. At some point, someone handed me a phone to call my family. I didn't know what to say. How do you tell someone you almost became part of a pile of missing people? I said I'd gotten lost. I said I was okay. I didn't mention the arm. I didn't mention the truck. I couldn't bring myself to put those words into the world yet. They kept me there overnight. I sat in a small room with a window that looked into a hallway. I drank coffee I didn't want. I stared at my scratched hands. In the morning, an investigator came in. She was calm and direct. She told me they were sending teams into the woods. She said they'd already found evidence that supported my report. She didn't give details. She asked me to walk through everything again. Slowly. I did. I told her about the first footprints near my tent. I told her about the fabric on the branch, the shoe, the lake, the shelters, the ravine, the man, the truck. She listened closely. She asked questions that made sense. What direction did the truck go? Did I see the license plate? Did the man speak with an accent? Did he have any visible marks? I didn't have good answers. I felt useless. She didn't make me feel that way. She just took what I could give. Before she left, she said, "You did a hard thing by coming out. A lot of people freeze. A lot of people don't make it." That sentence hit me like a shove. A lot of people don't make it. I pictured the pit again. I pictured the stream. I tried not to. They let me go later that day. They drove me to my car at the trailhead. A uniformed officer walked with me. The parking lot looked the same as when I'd left, like the woods hadn't changed. My car sat there with a thin layer of dust. I unlocked it and climbed in. The officer gave me a card with a phone number. He told me to call if I remembered anything else. He told me to avoid talking to the media. I nodded. I drove away. For a while, the road was lined with trees. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a truck behind me. There wasn't one, but my body didn't believe it. That night at home, I showered until my skin hurt. I scrubbed my hands. I cleaned under my nails. I still felt dirty. I tried to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the lake. I saw the pale shape at the waterline. I heard the calm knock on the ranger station door. Days passed, then weeks. The news started talking about it. They didn't say much at first. They used careful language. An investigation. Human remains. A search. Then the reports got more specific. Multiple victims. A suspected killer. A man living in the woods. A truck seen near the area. They asked for tips. They didn't release his name. They didn't say if they had him. People around me started asking questions when they heard I'd gone hiking. I lied. I said it had been fine. I didn't want to be the person who told that story at dinner. I didn't want to see their faces change. But the story didn't stay quiet. The investigator called me again. She asked if I could come in. I did. She showed me photos, not of bodies, of a truck, of a man caught on a camera at a gas station, a hooded jacket, work boots, a face that looked ordinary in the worst way. She asked if it was the man. I stared at the photo until my eyes watered. I said, "I think so." She nodded. She said they'd found his campsite. They'd found tools. They'd found items belonging to missing people. She didn't list them. She didn't have to. She said they were still searching for him. That meant he was still out there. I went home and checked my locks twice. I bought a brighter porch light. I slept with my phone on the bed. I started jumping at noises. One afternoon, a month after my hike, I got another call. They'd caught him. They found him not in the deep woods, but near the edge, close to a road, as if he'd been moving between places. He didn't fight much, they said. He didn't say much. He just looked at the officers like they were inconveniences. When the investigator told me that, I felt something loosen in my chest. Relief, yes. But not the kind that makes you happy. The kind that leaves you empty. After that, people wanted details. They wanted to know what I saw. They wanted to know how close I came. They wanted to know if I could tell when he was watching me. I couldn't answer most of it. The truth was simple and ugly. I was alone in the woods. I found signs of what he'd done. I saw him. He almost found me. The only reason I'm here to tell it is because he made a choice not to chase me right then. Or he thought he had more time. Sometimes late at night, I still think about the moment at the fallen tree. The flashlight beam climbing the bark, the gloved hand, the calm breathing, the way he turned away like he'd set me aside. That's the part I can't shake. Not the gore, not the bodies, not the pit, the patience, the certainty, the idea that in his mind, the woods were his, and people were just things that wandered in. I don't hike alone anymore. I don't camp in places without cell service. Sometimes I miss the quiet I'd been chasing. But when I think about that lake, about the still water and the pale shape at the shore, I realize the quiet I wanted wasn't real. The woods were never empty. I just couldn't see who else was there. And the worst part is that for a long time, other people couldn't see it either. They walked the same trails. They filtered water from the same streams. They sat by the same fire rings. They listened to the same quiet. And somewhere beyond the trees, a man moved through it all, calm and careful, leaving pieces behind like breadcrumbs. When I drive past forests now, I don't see peace. I see places where you can disappear. And I remember how easy it was to believe I was alone. How wrong that was. How close I came to being one more missing name in a trail register that nobody reads. I keep that old map in a drawer. It still smells faintly like smoke and dirt. Sometimes I take it out and look at the lines. The lake. The trail split. The service road. The ranger station. It looks so tidy on paper. It doesn't show the tarp shelters, doesn't show the pit. It doesn't show the hand hanging near the turnoff. It doesn't show the way a calm knock on a locked door can make you feel like you've already lost. It's just a map. But I know what's between those lines. And that knowledge doesn't fade the way you'd expect. It sits there, quiet, waiting, like the woods did. I should tell you there were gaps. Not gaps like I forgot whole events, but moments where my mind went blank and then snapped back. After the first tarp shelter, there was a stretch of time where I kept drifting off the direction I wanted. I'd stop, check the compass, correct, and somehow end up angled the same wrong way again. The woods played tricks on me, but I also wasn't thinking straight. At one point, I walked into a patch of young trees so tight I had to push through them sideways. Their branches slapped my pack and snagged my sleeves. I got turned around. When I forced my way out, I came out into a spot I recognized. The shoe. It was there again. Same moss. Same angle. Like I'd walked in a circle even though I was sure I hadn't. That shook me more than the bodies, in a strange way. Bodies were impossible, but they still had a simple meaning. Someone had done something awful. A circle in the woods meant I couldn't trust my own sense of where I was. I didn't go back to look at the shoe up close. I just backed away and changed direction on purpose, even if it meant going through rougher ground. Not long after that, I found another sign that made it clear I wasn't alone out there. A small pile of items, arranged in a way that felt intentional. A torn backpack, a water bottle with stickers on it, a hat, a glove. They were set on a flat rock like someone had laid them out to dry, except they were dirty and stiff, and there wasn't any reason to leave them like that. I didn't touch anything, but I remember the water bottle because of the stickers. One was a cartoon frog. Another was a simple name label, the kind people put on lunchboxes. I could read the first name. That got to me. A name turned the whole thing into a person, and my brain didn't want that. I moved on, and I kept thinking about that pile. I wondered if it was a marker for him, if it meant something, if it was bait. A little later, I heard a sound that made my skin go cold. A single sharp whistle, not a bird, not wind, not a random noise. A human whistle. Clean and controlled. It came from somewhere to my right, deeper in the trees. I stopped with one foot half raised, like I'd been caught mid-step. I waited. No second whistle. No voice. But the message felt clear anyway. Someone was out there and they wanted me to know it. I started moving again, faster, and I stopped trying to be quiet. I didn't crash through brush on purpose, but I also didn't tiptoe. I didn't want to act like prey. That sounds ridiculous now, like a tough guy idea. I wasn't tough. I was terrified. But I didn't want him to enjoy the thought that I was sneaking around, scared. I wanted him to think I was already gone. The terrain got ugly. More wet ground, more rocks, and a section where fallen branches made a tangled mess. I climbed over and under, scraping my shins and catching my pack strap on splinters. I cursed out loud, then regretted it. I kept expecting to hear footsteps behind me again. Instead, I heard nothing for a long time. And that weirdly, was worse. When you hear someone, at least you can track them. Silence turns into a question mark. I remember reaching a spot where the trees thinned and the ground was littered with old cut stumps, like a logging area from years ago. The stumps were gray and soft with rot. In the middle of it was a shallow depression filled with rainwater. Something floated in that water. A pale shape. I didn't go near it. I didn't need to. My brain had learned enough by then to recognize what was human and what wasn't. I turned away so fast I almost tripped. Later, when I tried to describe that part to the investigator, I couldn't give a good location. It blurred with everything else. In my mind, the woods from that point on became a series of small scenes. Rocks, mud, a broken branch, a strip of cloth, a smell that came and went depending on which way the wind moved. One thing I do remember clearly is finding a phone. It was face down in damp leaves, cracked, the screen black. I almost stepped on it. I picked it up without thinking, then immediately hated myself for touching it. It was cold and heavier than I expected, like it had been there a while. I turned it over and saw a case with a photo under the clear plastic. 2 people standing close together, smiling. That hit me hard. Harder than the gore I'd avoided looking at. I put the phone back down. I wiped my hand on my pants until the fabric was wet. I kept going. When I reached the road, I thought the worst part was over. But the road was its own trap. In the woods, at least I could move in any direction. On the road, I was a person in an open strip, easy to see. When the truck appeared, I felt stupid for ever believing I could just walk out. The slow way it drove, the way the lights moved like they were scanning, that's what told me it wasn't some random ranger. It was hunting behavior. After I got to the ranger station and Mark let me in, I thought the terror would turn into relief right away. It didn't. The fear stayed stuck in my body like a fever. Even when officers arrived, even when I was in town, even when there were walls and lights and other people, a part of me stayed in the woods, still listening for footsteps. In the days after, I kept replaying the choices I made. Why I took the rough shortcut. Why I didn't turn back to the main trail. Why I went hiking alone in the first place. I know that kind of thinking doesn't help. You can always build a safer version of your life when you already know what happens. But my brain did it anyway. I learned later that the area had been on the edge of a bigger search for a while. Not a public one. There had been missing persons reports. People who didn't come back from solo trips. A hunter who found something that didn't fit any animal. But the woods are huge, and people go missing in them all the time for normal reasons. That's part of what made it easy for him. When someone disappears in a forest, you can blame weather, or cliffs, or bad luck. You don't have to imagine a man with gloves and a plan. After he was caught, I expected it to end cleanly. It didn't. It became paperwork and interviews and long waits. It became hearing the same questions again and again from different people. It became trying to explain what a smell was like, or how the silence felt, or how the truck moved. Those aren't facts you can measure, but they mattered. A few months later, they asked me to come in again, this time for something more formal. A recorded statement. Lawyers present. I sat in a room that was too bright and too cold and told the story again. Saying it out loud so many times didn't make it easier. It just made it more real. At some point, they asked if I would be willing to testify if it went to trial. I said yes, because what else do you say? Then, after I left the building, I sat in my car and shook for 10 minutes. The idea of seeing him again, even in a courtroom, made my stomach twist. The investigator, the same one who first interviewed me, called later and told me I didn't have to decide right away. She didn't pressure me. That helped. It made me feel like a person again instead of just a piece of evidence. I started therapy after that. I didn't want to. I'm the kind of person who thinks they can handle things by themselves. But I couldn't sleep. I'd wake up convinced I'd heard a boot scrape on the floor. I'd check my apartment door and find it locked. But I'd still stand there for a minute with my hand on the knob, listening. I stopped running on wooded trails near my place. I stopped taking shortcuts through parks at night. I started noticing every man in a dark jacket. I hated that. My therapist told me the fear response doesn't care about logic. It cares about patterns. My brain had learned a pattern. Quiet woods plus isolation equals danger. It didn't matter that most woods aren't like that. It didn't matter that the odds were low. My body had made up its mind. When the trial finally happened, I did testify. Not because I wanted to relive it, but because the alternative felt worse. I sat in a hallway outside the courtroom, waiting. I could hear muffled voices through the door. When they called my name, my legs felt heavy, like my bones were filled with sand. I walked in and took the oath and sat down. I kept my eyes on the prosecutor, not on the defense table. I still saw him, though. Not clearly, not like in a movie where you lock eyes. Just a shape in my peripheral vision. A man sitting still. And what got me was how ordinary he looked. Not like a monster. Not like something you can spot easily. The prosecutor asked me to tell what happened. I did. I spoke slowly. I tried not to drift. When I described the lake, my voice almost broke. But I kept going. When I described the truck, I felt the same cold rush in my chest that I'd felt on the road. The defense attorney asked questions meant to poke holes. Could I be sure the man I saw in the woods was the same man at the station? Could I be sure the hand I saw was human? Could I be sure the truck's headlights were scanning for me and not just lighting the road? He said these things in a calm voice, like he was discussing a traffic accident. I answered the best I could. I didn't argue. I didn't exaggerate. I just said what I knew and what I didn't. When it was over, I walked out of the courtroom and sat on a bench in the hallway and stared at the floor. I felt drained, like someone had poured me out. I thought it would feel like closure. It didn't. It felt like I'd opened a door I couldn't shut. The sentence came later. I didn't go back for it. I read the headline online and then closed my laptop. People asked me how I felt. I said, I don't know. Because that was the truth. Part of me wanted to feel triumphant. Part of me wanted to feel safe. Mostly I just felt tired. There's one more thing I haven't told many people because it sounds strange, and I'm not sure what it means. After he was caught, I went back to that area once, Months later, with a group hike. Not the same trail, not the same season. Bright day, lots of people. I didn't tell them why I wanted to go. I just said I needed to prove something to myself. We stayed on marked paths. We ate lunch by a different lake. We joked and took photos. And for a while it felt normal. Then, on the way back, I smelled that sour smell. Just a faint trace. So faint that nobody else noticed. I stopped walking. I looked into the trees. I didn't see anything. No tarp. No marker cloth. No piles of gear. Just woods. But the smell was there for a few seconds, and my body reacted like it had been hit. My hands went numb. My vision narrowed. I couldn't hear what my friends were saying. It passed quickly. The wind shifted, and the smell vanished. I kept walking, pretending I was fine. But later at home, I realized something. I hadn't been afraid because I thought he was there. I was afraid because the woods had proven they could hold things I couldn't see. That's the part that sticks. Not just that a man did terrible things, but that he did them quietly, in a place people think of as peaceful. He didn't need a basement or a locked room. He just needed trees. I keep that old map in a drawer. It still smells faintly like smoke and dirt. Sometimes I take it out and look at the lines. The lake. The trail split. The service road. The ranger station. It looks so tidy on paper. It doesn't show the tarp shelters. It doesn't show the pit. It doesn't show the hand hanging near the turnoff. It doesn't show the way a calm knock on a locked door can make you feel like you've already lost. It's just a map. But I know what's between those lines. And that knowledge doesn't fade the way you'd expect. It sits there, quiet, waiting, like the woods did.